Okay, hello everyone, this is Jaren from Orbital Strike. Today I'm going to be talking to you about the Vanguard, which as I'm sure you know is one of the advanced classes of the Trooper base class. If I bring this up here, you can see that the spec I'm going to be talking to you about today is Tactics. However, the more eagle-eyed viewers will note that there are a couple of key abilities or talents missing here. And this is for what I think is a very good reason, which is that I use this iron cell rather than a high energy cell, which is the standard cell that you would usually use in the tactics tree. So why use iron cell? Well, this is a spec that is very close to my heart. It's seen quite a lot of popularity over the past couple of months since the introduction of arenas. It's a spec I've been playing since late 2012 and is still one of my favourite specs in the game. It has a lot of DPS potential, while still maintaining a fantastic level of survivability. As a trooper you have heavy armour by default, which you can increase by 60% with iron cell here. On top of that you can spec into a 16% increase to your armour, which equates to something like 3% extra damage reduction, which is this can add up to a lot. On top of that, Tactics will give you 30% extra damage reduction from area effect attacks, which are quite common in the game, particularly if you're up against Focus, Guardians, or various other AoE heavy classes, as well as taking 30% less damage from everyone while stunned. On top of that you have this 25% damage reduction from Reactive Shield, which is your class 2-minute cooldown. And in Tactics you get this fantastic little cooldown reduction on Reactive Shield once you get attacked as well. So you can see that it's a very survivable class, a very survivable spec rather, with some great DPS potential from the Tactics tree. And I'll come back to this tree in a bit, we'll go through that. For now I'll start by showing you a couple of moves in your rotation. So what I generally start with is Gut, which is this ability here, which does a moderate amount of damage to start off with, followed by a quite nice dot. You can find it here in your skill tree, and the reason I start with this is that you have this ability Triumph, which increases the damage you deal to bleeding targets by 3%. 3%, it might not sound like a lot, but it does add up, and it is very useful. So if you're starting with that, then all of your subsequent abilities are going to, all of your subsequent attacks are going to hit for a bit more, which is very nice. Particularly as Iron Cell got not nerfed, but brought into line with some of the other tank classes in 2.0 with this 5% damage reduction. So yes, that extra 3% is quite handy. So after starting with Gut, I then move into a Fire Pulse. And you'll see I get 2 procs up from Fire Pulse. I get Battering Ram, which makes your next stock strike free, and also Pulse Generator, which increases the damage of your next Pulse Cannon, which is this. Now Pulse Generator is the sort of stock skill of the Tactics tree. This is what gives you your big hitter of the tree, and we'll watch this build up. So we're going to start with Gut, Fire Pulse. At this point I then want to use Stock Strike to make the most of this proc here. Now I'll come back to why I want to use that there in a bit, but from there you want to use Iron Pulse. And you can see that this has added a stack to Pulse Generator, but also that's added another proc to Battering Ram. Now this is the reason why I used Stock Strike before, is that whilst Fire Pulse has a 100% chance to proc Battering Ram, Iron Pulse has a 30% chance. You can see this here. So if I have started with Stock Strike, and then, started with Fire Pulse, then going into Stock Strike, and then want to Iron Pulse twice to build up these 3 stacks of Pulse Generator, there's a fairly decent chance that I might proc stock strike again, which would be quite nice because that's something that we can use in the downtime between using our pulse cannons. By default, pulse cannon has an 18-second cooldown. However, in Tactics this is reduced to 15, which is still quite a long amount of time for this to be down, so you do have quite a bit of filler in between. So to go from start to finish, we gut for our damage increase, fire pulse, stock strike to use our battering ram proc, iron pulse twice to build up pulse generator, and at this point we now want to use pulse cannon. So having three stacks of pulse generator has increased the damage we deal with pulse cannon by 60%. It's also reduced its energy cell cost, and it has slowed our target by 90%, as well as making the ability immune to interrupts. So that is basically the rotation. What you're then going to want to do is weave in various other abilities whilst trying to keep your energy cell level to a good point. And you have two abilities: reserve power cell and recharge cells, which will help your energy management. Recharge cells gives you 50% energy, 50 energy cells back over 3 seconds, which is, as you can see, half of your overall cells. For those of you who don't know how the energy regeneration works for troopers, when you are using abilities, you can see that trying to make my resources drop to a point where I can show this. You can see there are now only 2 arrows here, and this reflects the regeneration rate of your energy. So you can see it drops when you go below a certain point, and this means that the less arrows that you have lit up here, the slower your energy will regenerate. So you do need to be careful not to drop too low, otherwise it will take longer for you to get back up to 100%, which is where these two abilities come in. However, once it's time for your pulse cannon to be used again, so you might have waited the 15-second cooldown for this to come back up, and you've built up your pulse generator stacks. There's something that you have to keep in mind, which is that yes, when you have your pulse generator stacks, you will be immune to interrupts. However, you are not immune to being knocked back or stunned, or immune to any of the other CCs that this game is full of. There's not much you can do about being stunned, but there is something you can do about knockbacks, and that is this wonderful ability here, Hold the Line. This was one of my favourite abilities in the game up until 2.0, when BioWare decided to give this to all trooper classes as a level 24 ability, I think. This is one of the most useful abilities in the game, and it has saved my life 100 times over in a hut ball, for example. I used to be the dedicated ball carrier in quite a lot of our matches, where someone would throw me the ball and I would just pop this as I was running over a fire pit, and then you could just watch the harpoons ping off of you, or knockbacks wash over you, anything. By the time people realised that they couldn't knock you back and tried to stun you, you were already over the fire pit and immune to everything. It's a very, very tactical ability, so be very careful with how you use it. Try not to use it at the wrong time, and try and make sure that you have it when you're actually going to need it. So if you have built up your 3 stacks of pulse generator, and you don't want to get knocked back, just hold the line. And you've just managed to get your all ticks of your pulse cannon off without someone knocking you back, which would be incredibly frustrating, because then you have to wait another 15 seconds to be able to use that again. Furthermore, you also have this ability, Battle Focus, which I believe is the level 50 ability for Vanguards, which increases your ranged and tech critical hit chance by 25%. Now, Pulse Cannon is an example of a tech ability. Fire Pulse and Iron Pulse, I believe, are both tech as well. Yes, they are. So this will affect them as well. When you need to really put out some DPS, for example in an arena, or when you need to burst something down, it is a great idea to use it in conjunction with your standard rotation. You'll see that that Battle Focus goes on for 15 seconds, which means that you're not going to be able to get 2 pulse cannons into that time because of the cooldown, and as well as the channel time, but you will be able to get the rest of your abilities in there. It's also worth noting that Mortar Volley is also affected by this, which does a nice big chunk of damage to several targets, but does have an energy cell cost. I'm not going to talk about Mortar Volley here, because that's something that that all troopers have. It's not really affected too much by the tactics spec. So there you go. That is your basic rotation as a tactics Vanguard with a bit of Iron Cell. This is not exactly how you would do it as a full tactics, because there are a couple of extra little abilities or skills from the skill tree, which would increase your damage output by a little bit more. So one I'm thinking of in particular is an automatic critical hit on high impact bolt. Sorry, I forgot to talk there. This used to be not tied into high energy cell, so it used to give us quite a nice little bit of damage, but unfortunately the devs clued in onto this and got rid of it. However, you can still make high impact bolt part of your rotation though, since Gut offers the dot that is the prerequisite for high impact bolt, and this is part of your filler rotation, while still waiting for Pulse Cannon to come back up. So if we start with Gut, Fire Pulse, Stock Strike, Iron Pulse, you can see we have the Battering Ram proc up here. Iron Pulse again. And Stock Strike has now just come off of the timer just in time. Unfortunately, I paused a little bit too long there to point out the proc. So dot has worn off, the dot has worn off, but you can see where you would have had a chance to use high impact bolt there. When Gut wears off, just reapply it. You can see the high impact bolt gives a nice little burst of damage there. The dot on Gut is enough that you want to try and keep this up on your target the whole time, particularly with your 3% damage increase, as well as the snare, 50% snare that this brings. So yes, that is pretty much everything. Various other abilities to weave into your rotation are Hammer Shot, maybe a bit of Sticky Grenade. It's particularly nice if you want to get a stealther as they're trying to run away from you. It's quite satisfying to see them pop out of stealth if they've forgotten to use their cleanse before, sorry, their purge, or whatever it is BioWare are calling it in 2.5. If they've forgotten to use their dispel of all hostile negative effects, then that's quite nice to see them pop out of stealth a couple of seconds later with a grenade. So Vanguard is primarily a sort of melee range class. If you're an assault specialist, you typically operate in the sort of 10 meter range. For a tactics Vanguard, you're generally pretty much up there. A lot of your abilities are used within 4 meters. You have a couple of 10 meters as well, but stock strike, gut, these are examples of abilities where you want to be right up close and personal. And in keeping with this, you can use pretty much all of your abilities except for pulse cannon and mortar volley on the move. So take advantage of this. Run in circles around your opponent if you need to, especially if you know that they need to have you in front of them. Keep them on their toes. Keep them having to move, and try and utilize the terrain to your advantage. So now I'm going to just talk through the skill tree, give a bit of justification to the abilities that I've chosen, and explain the ones that I haven't. So to start off with, on the bottom tier, Demolition increases the critical hit chance of elemental attacks by 6%. This should be fairly self-explanatory as to why we've chosen this. Elemental attacks. Fire Pulse is an example of one, Iron Pulse, and Pulse Cannon. So you can see these are your 3 main abilities in this spec, are all elemental damage. This used to be over in the Shield Specialist tree. Thankfully it's been moved over here now. Power Armor, increased damage reduction by 2%. As tactics in Iron Cell, this is what we like. A little bit of extra damage reduction to make us as tanky as possible. There's also a reason why we've taken this, which I'll come back to. Focused Impact increases range and tech accuracy by 3%. Accuracy is very good. And also High Impact Bolt penetrates 45% of the target's armor. Another reason to use High Impact Bolt down here. This is a very nice ability, a very nice skill that gives High Impact Bolt a bit of an extra kick. Tactical Tools reduces the cooldown of Pulse Cannon by 3 seconds and Harpoon by 10 seconds. You should just stop reading at Pulse Cannon there. Obviously in tactics we're going to want this, we want to use Pulse Cannon as often as we can. The fact that it affects Harpoon as well is just even better, because Harpoon is one of those abilities that if you use it correctly in PvP, it can be absolutely devastating, particularly in Hut Ball. The number of times where I've been up against a good player in a Hut Ball and have just been constantly pulled into the fire, if I haven't been on a class that can resist something like that, I've lost track of the times. It can really do a huge amount of stuff, so just getting a 10% reduction on that is pretty awesome. Containment Tactics reduces the cooldown of Cryo Grenade by 10 seconds, so this is our 4-second stun. It's not much for 2 points, I will happily acknowledge that, but it's something, and there is a reason why we're investing quite heavily in some of these abilities at the bottom of the tree, which I'll talk about in just a second. Frontline Offense increases the damage by Iron Pulse and Gut by 6%. Again, this is a damage increase. We like this. Brilliant. I have not chosen Blaster Augs, or Augs, or however you want to pronounce that. The reason for that is that, in my opinion, it is simply not worth it. For Iron Cell, it increases the damage dealt by Iron Cell by 8%. This is important to note that the damage dealt by Iron Cell is a very different thing to the damage dealt whilst you are in Iron Cell. Some people can get this slightly confused. So what it means by this is that when you do a ranged attack in Iron Cell, you have a 15% chance to deal 270 additional energy damage. Adding 8% to that is, in my opinion, not worth losing a skill point over. That's just me, you might feel differently. In tactics, in standard tactics, high energy cell would get an increase to all internal and elemental damage dealt by 1%. Again, if you think that's worth it, go for it. But again, that would just be for standard tactics, so using high energy cell. Gut, this is, well, we've covered this. This is our dot for the tree, gives you a couple of extra little buffs further up. Frontline defense reduces the cooldown of Riot Strike by 2 seconds. I love this ability. I cannot emphasize this enough. I love this skill. This gives you an interrupt on a 6-second cooldown, and prevents that ability from being used for the next 4 seconds. That's pretty awesome. At least I think it's pretty awesome. To be able to use your interrupt more often is fantastic. This is rivaled only by a Watchman Sentinel in terms of its interrupt capability. And so yeah, I would highly recommend taking this skill. We leave out Battlefield Training, which increases the movement speed by 7.5% whilst high energy cell is active. Simply and hopefully obviously because we don't use high energy cells, this would be kinda pointless. Some people will take this because they like to switch between iron cell and high energy cell. However, I just do not see the point in this. If it did not have an activation time, as you can see there, I would perhaps consider it, but in reality this is not really something that you can do that often in a war zone. The times when you would need to change, you're probably in combat, and if you get interrupted halfway through, you're suddenly left without a cell, and you're in trouble. The other one I didn't choose on this line is Cell Generator, so while high energy cell is active, you regenerate 1 energy cell every 1.5 seconds. Again, we don't use high energy cell here, so we can skip that by default. It should now be starting to become obvious as to why we've invested quite heavily down here, that there are only 3 points here. So it is necessary to have a couple of extras down here in order to progress to the next level. So carrying on, Serrated Blades increases the damage dealt by Gut's bleed effect by 15%. This is pretty sizable. If you look at Gut, you can see that is with that buff we do 2061 internal damage over 15 seconds. It's a decent amount, 15%. And then Triumph, we've looked at before, increases the damage you deal to bleeding targets by 3%. Might not sound like much, as we said, but you know, it's something. Battering Ram. Iron Pulse has a 30% chance, and Fire Pulse has a 100% chance to make your next stock strike free. This is one of the core skills of this tree, and it's a proc that you have to watch out for. It's at least reliable from Fire Pulse, but it is possible to forget that Iron Pulse will have a chance to do this as well, and there is no cooldown here. So you should keep an eye out for this and try and work Stock Strike into your rotation. Hamstring. Gut slows the target by 50% for 6 seconds. Again, this snare, brilliant. We're hammering on someone, we're slowing them, eating into them. It's a nice little ability that gives Gut a bit more of an appeal. Advance the Line. This is where Hold the Line used to be an ability just for Tactics Vanguards. It now increases the duration by 4 seconds. It's, in truth, a bit of a slap in the face compared to what used to be there, which was Hold the Line as an ability by itself, but an extra 4 seconds, we can work with that. We can deal with it. So that's quite nice. Pulse Generator, as we've said, this is the core skill of the tree, increasing the damage by your next pulse cannon by 20% per stack, and doing these other things such as adding a slow, reducing energy cell cost, and everything else. What we didn't choose here was Combat Tactics. Whilst high energy cell is active, there you go, you can stop reading there. Carrying on, damage dealt by Stock Strike makes your next high impact bolt an automatic critical hit. A sad loss for this tree when we're working in Iron Cell, but the benefits will far outweigh this loss. Carrying on, Havoc Training. Increases the surge bonus of stock strike, pulse cannon, gut and fire pulse by 30%. This is really, really nice, primarily because of this. Battle focus increases range and tech critical hit chance by 25%. We looked at this earlier. That is quite nice. You will end up getting quite a few critical hits during that time. Pulse cannon and fire pulse are both affected by this, so to get a surge bonus there is quite nice. Shock absorbers. I love this ability. I love a lot of skills in this tree. This is one of the big ones. Reduces damage taken from area effects by 30%. Additionally, while stunned, you take 30% less damage from all sources. Wonderful. So there are a lot of AoE abilities in this game, and quite a lot of the time in this game you're stunned, so just getting less damage during these times is just brilliant. Carrying on, reflexive shield. You have a 100% chance to reduce the active cooldown of reactive shield by 3 seconds when you take damage. So if you are being attacked constantly for a minute, this will effectively reduce the cooldown on reactive shield from 2 minutes to 1 minute. And that's how that works out. What's also really nice is that when you take damage, you have a 20% chance to create this energy readout, which is a damage absorb, a bit like the blade barrier for Jedi Guardian tanks. This is nice. It gives you a lot more survivability, even though it only absorbs a low amount. It is nice and it is noticeable. You can always tell when it's active because you hear a little tss, tss sound. that's my impersonation of an energy readout shield. So that's nice. Now, charged loaders. Finally, to my favourite skill in this tree. Increases the damage dealt by shoulder cannon by 15% and immediately loads 3 additional missiles. Yay, so what, I hear you say. Shoulder cannon is perhaps one of the most underestimated abilities brought in 2.0, and a lot of people will complain about it and say, oh, boo-hoo, this doesn't give me enough of a damage increase. Shoulder cannon is an ability that when you activate it, you get a little hairdryer that pops up here. There's my hairdryer. This will now fire, first of all, it'll load missiles over a couple of seconds, which you can then use off of the cooldown. So there you go. So 15% extra damage and loading 3 additional missiles. So what? But it doesn't just do that. It does not just load 3 additional missiles, it immediately loads them. What does this mean? Well, what this means is that when you are standing there guarding and someone comes up to you, some stealther comes up to you and puts a stealth mez on you, they will now pop out of stealth. You have 2 choices. First of all, you could pop your stealth breaker, your CC breaker, and start attacking them, at which point they'll probably stealth, mez you again and continue to cap, at which point there's nothing you can do and you've lost the node, you silly Billy. However, what you could do is activate shoulder cannon, at which point you instantly get 3 missiles which appear, and you can now use these whilst you are stunned. Yes, I will say that again, you can use shoulder cannon whilst you are stunned. This is perhaps what I don't think a lot of people get this, and perhaps why they underestimate it, or perhaps just a lot of them don't like to guard enough. But this is what makes the Vanguard one of the best node guarders in the game, because they can just happily sit there whilst stealthers are popping up all around them and just tab between them while stunned. Bam, interrupt you, until the stealth wears off, and then they can just carry on fighting. I don't know how else I can persuade you that this is a good ability, so what I will do is I will switch now to a clip I took in a war zone earlier today. of this in action, and you can decide for yourself. So you can see here that I'm standing right on the pylon in Ancient Hypergate. I'm doing this deliberately because I want them to try and stealth cap me and then be within range when I turn around and hit them. Okay, so there we go. That was how shoulder cannon is used when guarding a pylon. So carrying on through our skill tree, we reach Fire Pulse. Again, there's not much to say about this. It's a pretty big hitting ability. It's just part of your rotation. Gives a 100% chance to proc Stock Strike as well as Pulse Generator. That's pretty great. You then really have two options here, but since we're talking about Iron Cell, I'm going to talk about going into Shield Specialist. This Steely Resolve is one of the little nice change-arounds that BioWare did in 2.0. They brought this down from higher up in this tree and made it accessible to everyone, which increases aim by 9%. Shouldn't need to explain this. Any increase to your main stat is a wonderful thing, and 9% is pretty decent. Static Field. Iron Pulse and Explosive Surge spawn a static field, lowering the target's damage dealt by 5% for 10 seconds. This is pretty decent. Lowering your target's damage dealt by 5%. This is fantastic. On top of the other advantages that on top of the other abilities you have in this class. So you have your taunts, you have your guards, and on top of that, someone you attack will get static field, damage dealt reduced. Overall, you're providing a lot of utility to your team, and if you work in Explosive Surge here, and you're standing in the middle of a group of people, then you will apply this to all of them, and that's quite useful. We don't take Brutal Impact, increases the damage of High Impact Bolt by 3% or 6% when fully traded. You can do this if you want, but I just don't see the value in it. The reason for that is that what I'm interested in Shield Specialist is on this line here, which is Rebraced Armor, which increases your armor rating by 16%. As we said earlier, this is a rough increase of 3% damage reduction. It's pretty nice. At this point you have three points left over. What I choose to do is to spread them out like this. One in Neural Overload, so Iron Cell damage now lowers the movement speed of the target by 50% for 2 seconds. I am currently debating whether or not to keep this, but I will for the time being. Since I already have quite a nice range of snares in my arsenal, I might as well have another one and just be a complete pest for someone and make sure they're snared 100% of the time pretty much. I then put my remaining 2 points over here in Soldier's Endurance, which increases endurance by 2%. Why do I do this? I just happen to like a slightly bigger health pool. You might choose to put this somewhere else, so for example over in Iron Overload, or in Overcharged Cell Capacitor, or even over here, so increasing damage dealt by Stock Strike. So this is where I'm currently considering putting some points, since the critical hit chance of Stock Strike gets an increase here. I have 100% stock, 100% free Stock Strike over in Battering Ram, so just getting a bit of extra damage in an ability you use quite a lot would be quite nice. But that's where it currently is at the moment. I probably will end up moving this around. So there you go. So that is a view on the tactics with Iron Cell Vanguard. The reason I love this spec is that it has great survivability, as we've seen. It has some pretty nice damage potential. On top of that, you have your taunts, guards, everything else that the Vanguard does well. It's a really underestimated spec, or perhaps people are starting to realise its potential now. Perhaps it's no longer becoming underestimated, which is why it's becoming a bit more popular. But either way, it is a fantastic spec that I would highly recommend. And that is pretty much all I can think of to say on this. If you have any questions, and as always, post them in the comments below this, or post them on the forum if you're an Orbital striker. That's pretty much it for today then. As far as gear, I should probably say something about gear, since I've debated for a very long time on this. As far as gear goes, I used to do the following. Have tank implants, relics, well, have a mix of relics, tank, weapons, shield, braces, belt, and maybe even boots or helm or whatever, but then have a 4-piece combat tech set bonus. The reason I want that is that the set bonus for Super Commando, which is the tank set for troopers, that is pretty useless for what we want to do. It provides a buff to Storm, and a couple of other things which I can't remember right now off the top of my head. However, the combat tech set bonus reduces the cooldown of your CC breaker by 15 seconds, increases duration of your AoE stun by half a second, which is still useful, and also increases the critical chance of rocket punch or stock strike. So rocket punch is the bounty hunter equivalent of stock strike, and again, if we add that 15% on top of the critical hit chance of stock strike by 6% up here, it's pretty decent, which is another reason why I'm considering moving some points over into heavy stock down here. However, what I am now considering, and in fact not considering, I've started to do, is to move, or rather to switch to full DPS gear. So I'm in the process of this at the moment. I'm now trying to stack power and surge into my gear. I have brought out all of the tank mods from my weapon and shield and have replaced them with DPS mods. I'm not sure what I'll do in regards to my relics yet. I currently like this, the power relic. I'm not so sure about getting a 410 absorb rating. I need to have another look at that. So there are two routes you can go down really. You can either go down the tank gearing route or the DPS gearing route. I happen to like going down the DPS route just because I feel I can put out a bit more damage, and I think that is perhaps a little bit more useful. Tanking gear would be a lot better if I was actually going down the full tank spec route. But for tactics Vanguards, it's nice to keep up that damage potential given the number of passive damage reduction skills that you have from this tree. So that's it in terms of gear. So I can happily debate this with you and have a talk about it, because it's something I still think about sometimes and try to decide. But that is now definitely all I can think of to talk about. So thank you for watching. Have a very Merry Christmas and enjoy playing the Vanguard Tactics with Iron Cell spec. Take care.